Hey everyone, welcome back to NDC, and today we're taking a look at Figma. We're going to be going through wireframing and planning out an iOS app. And for our app, we're going to be focusing on time management, so think of things like to-dos, priorities, and we're going to be using Figma's free tools. Whether you're a developer, a student, or just a little bit curious about app design, this is one of the best ways to get hands-on with user interface. Or if you're just curious about how to use Figma, we'll be going over some of those tools today. The first thing you'll need to do is head on over to figma.com. If you want to use the link in the description, feel free to do so. Otherwise, you will need to create a new account. If you are a student or educator, there might be a chance that your organization does offer the paid versions of Figma for free, but we're just going to be focusing on the free features today. So once you are signed into Figma, sometimes with new users, you kind of go through like a little intro kind of survey. What are you interested in learning? It might have already started you off in a blank template. Otherwise, if you're logged in and see the same page I do, you'll want to hit the design button, and this is going to take us to the page where we can actually design our first prototype in Wireframe. Something to note is as we're working through Figma, there's a lot of keyboard shortcuts that are very similar to other software. So actually at the bottom of your screen here, if you're on the design tab, it's kind of this middle one, and you go to the actions, you'd actually have the keyboard shortcuts up. You can even leave them here if you'd like. But even for things like text or tools, a lot of these are very similar to other softwares you may have used before. So like T being for text, R rectangle. So let's go ahead and get started with our app design. We'll make sure that we are first on this design tab in the bottom right, and we're going to be adding a new frame. It kind of looks like a little bit like the hashtag symbol on our keyboard. You can also access it with the F hotkey, and you'll notice on the right side of our screen here that we actually have a whole bunch of different phone designs, and there's even desktop, watch, etc. For our purposes today, we're going to be looking at iPhones. So I'm going to be selecting the iPhone 16. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and we can see that it's added this kind of blank canvas to our screen. And it's called iPhone 16 1. Let's go ahead and rename this new frame. So on the left side of our screen here, we can right click, and we're going to select rename, and I'm going to call this tab Home. So now we know this is going to be our home page. We'll include all of our home elements on this specific page. Okay, let's first start off by adding some text to our screen. It is our welcome screen after all. So we're going to click on the text tool, or you can use T on your keyboard here. And we're going to kind of drag a little outline of where we want our text to go. Now, something you'll also notice, we have these dotted lines kind of showing us where we are on the UI. So we can kind of see how far away we are from the edges and from the top as well. So I'm just going to kind of make an arbitrary size here for our text. And I'm going to go ahead and say welcome. I'm just going to add NDC. And, we are using text, so let's go ahead and also include an emoji. So I'm just going to put my little waving hand emoji there as well. Now, currently the text is a little bit small, but of course we can update this. We are using modern design software after all. So on the right side of our screen here, we can notice that we now have the kind of text selection. We have a lot of different options. We can mess with things like its position. So if you do want to kind of put an X and Y position, you can feel free to do so. You can even edit the dimensions here. You want to have an exact width and height. All of these different concepts do transfer over to coding. And we then have our typography. So on the typography, we can change things like the font. There are a lot of fonts that are kind of built in. You can even, do some Google fonts, which is great too, because if you do plan on downloading them and adding them to your app, you'll already know that they're existing on Google Fonts. So let's go ahead and do Poppins for this one. Now our font has adjusted to be Poppins, and it's a little bit small, so let's go ahead and make this the size of maybe 24. And we can also center adjust it. You can also choose to maybe align it in the middle, align it to the bottom or the top. I kind of like having everything in the middle if I can. And I'll move my camera out of the way. Maybe I'll be on this side for this video over here. We can kind of see on the right side, we have different effects as well, like stroke. We can see you can even change the color. So if we want to change the fill of the color, we can click on this kind of box here and we get the color wheel here. We even have the different hex codes. So if there is a color you're really passionate about, you can include it there. There's also the libraries for some typical UI colors as well if you'd like. We can make it custom, and you can even do things like gradient colors here. So if I wanted my text to maybe start out black and then kind of move towards a different color, maybe we'll do something a little bit more burgundy or maybe more rouge. We can kind of see that we've even added the gradient to the font. You can do so many cool things with this. I'm going to be a little bit boring with my text and just leave it as a flat black. But there's so many different things you could do, like adding a stroke. When you're designing your UI, it's totally up to you, but just make sure that things are legible. All right, we can go ahead and add another text box under our welcome message here. And let's have it kind of say, you know, here are your tasks today. So today's tasks. Now, something I also notice is as I've kind of been adding these text boxes, they're a little bit off skew. They're kind of to the left. So we have a couple options to fix our UI. We can either use the kind of snap grids here, and as we move it, you'll notice we have these red lines, and our UI elements are going to kind of snap a little bit more aggressively to those red lines, and this will allow us to put it either, you know, directly in the middle, if I want to kind of have it more left adjusted. Even as we move them around, it's kind of suggesting if I want to kind of have this text under the preceding text, this is about where I should be putting it. Otherwise, you do also have the option of using auto layout. So if we right click on our background, we can choose the add auto layout, and there's some other options. Sometimes what I like to do is actually just the suggest auto layout, and the auto layout will be added. And as we continue to add elements, it's going to kind of help us formulate our app in a way that's a little bit more user-friendly. So this is great for just quick prototyping. But just know you have the option to lay out things as you wish. Just like when you're coding, you can design your user interface as you want. Okay, so something that's really cool about using Figma is this Assets tab on the left side under our file. Just in case for whatever reason this is hidden, there is the Minimize and Expand UI. You should be able to access it with the Shift / on your keyboard. We can see here we have the assets, kind of like a little catalog with libraries. Since we're using the iPhone, we should actually have this little iPhone and iPad library here. If not, you may need to search for it. It's just called iOS 18 and iPad iOS 18. Let's go ahead and click on this, and we can see that we have a whole bunch of user interface options that are very common when working in programming languages like Swift and SwiftUI here. So let's go ahead and maybe I want a list to kind of have different items that people are seeing for their tasks. Let's go ahead and scroll, and we can see here that we have the list tab. And we have a bunch of different actual elements from the list with a little bit of a visual here. So let's go ahead and say, maybe I want a row. Let's go ahead and drag this over to our user interface. I'm going to drop my row in, and you can kind of see that my auto layout's done a little bit of its magic because it's saying, hey, I know you kind of have your tasks. I've seen how you've been grouping things. I'm going to put your task right underneath. And what's nice about these kind of assets is when we do click on them, on the right side of our design, we have all the different options here. We can even see that there's like an edit button. We can even add a little image. So if we do show the image, we get a little button prompting us to add one. I don't think we're going to be having one today, but we can also change the title. So maybe in my app, the title are the different tasks that people need to do. Maybe this one is email Tim. Something that might happen because we are using the Apple objects is it might say, hey, you don't have San Francisco font. That's totally okay. We can just replace it with another one. So since I don't have SF Pro, let's go ahead and replace it with our Poppins. Totally fine. Go ahead and replace that. Might just have to re-put our email Tim here. We can even choose to add details. So if we wanted to put Tim's email, so tim@tim.com, right? And we can kind of see how this would look from a real list element. There's even the grabber. There's so many nice little extra tools when designing your user interface that we can utilize. So instead of detail, we can say go to task. And we don't have to necessarily go grab another list item now. What we can do is we can copy and paste. So you can do your copy and paste key binding. So Command or Control C and then V. You can also right click. You can even do the copy paste as well with the option here. So let's go ahead and paste it a couple times. And let's update this because you don't need to email Tim that much. Maybe this one can be groceries. And for the details, it can be like eggs, bacon, right? Might kind of have some of those items. And maybe for this one, we can do walk, dog, walk. What's a good dog name? I don't know. Arnie? I don't know. That's the dog name that's coming to my head. Cool. So now we kind of have our tasks. Our UI is a little bit bland. So why don't we go ahead and spruce that up a little bit more? We can left click on the background here. We don't really have anything selected. You could also go to the File tab and kind of just click on where we've renamed it to be Home. And let's scroll down to the bottom where we have our fill. Let's go ahead and add maybe a gradient to kind of make our app look a little bit more clean. So I'm going to click on the gradient button here. And we can even choose the different types. Maybe I want to have a angular or a radial. I think linear is pretty cool. So I'm going to select the first color by selecting the kind of first box here. And I think for my brand, maybe some blues would be really cool. Kind of like a nice sky blue here. And then on the other side of the gradient, maybe I'll do white. We can even rotate the gradient if we like. So if we want to start with white and go down more to the blue, we can totally do that as well. So as we've kind of been building things, we can kind of see that on the left side, we can even click or even hover over the different items just to get a quick glimpse of where they're at. It's also something with layering. We can actually put objects over one another, so the order does matter here. Okay, let's say I have a really cool app icon that I want to add. I've already created it before. How do I add images? Well, it's as easy as just dragging and dropping the image in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my desktop where I have my app icon, and I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this into our project. Now it's a little bit big, and that's totally fine because we can either use the kind of scaling here, we can even add like radiuses to adjust how the app icon is situated. We've been using auto layout and it's put my app icon all the way at the bottom. Not to worry, we can actually grab this object and we can see it kind of pushes everything else a little bit down. You can also adjust how your auto layout works by clicking on the background or home tab over here. And under the auto layout, we can kind of see it's put us to the vertical mode, which means it's kind of pushing everything down or up. But there's also the freeform, horizontal, or a little bit more of a grid layout. You don't have to use auto layout, it's totally up to you. Okay, let's say we're kind of happy with our homepage. What if I want to add those different task pages and I want to navigate to them? So first what we need to do is we need to create a new frame. So you can either use F or you can click the frame at the bottom here, iPhone 16. Let's go ahead and put it next to each other. Let's also rename this one because, you know, iPhone 16-1 isn't really a great name. And as you add more and more of these frames and phone screens, it'll be really great that you have them properly named. And let's call this one email example, or it could even be task example if you'd like. So what I like to do even before I start designing is I like to kind of think about the flow of my app. So we're going to be starting with our homepage. That makes sense. Are we going to be navigating to those other screens? Well, it would make sense to me if we clicked on this kind of go to task on our list and we were taken to the corresponding page with maybe some details. Maybe we'll also add a plus button here so people can add their different tasks. For now, we need to be able to go to said task. So what we can do is we can click on the element we want to use for navigation. We can go to the prototype on the right side of our screen here. And you'll see that we have this interactions tab. I'm going to press the plus button to add an interaction. We can even change how it triggers. We have a little drop down menu here, so we can actually also disable it if we want with the none, but otherwise tapping it, maybe dragging, you can even do hovering, pressing, etc. Or even you can do timed delays if you want to get really cool and crazy with your animations. For me, clicking on something more like a button or list item, that would be on tap. And what action do we want to have happen? We can scroll to, we can even open up links, but we're going to be doing the navigate to. And then for our destination, this is where we can choose those different frames. So in my head, we're going to be tapping on the option to email Tim, and we're going to be going to that phone screen. And now we can see we have this little arrow connection that's connecting the two elements. We have this little circle saying, hey, this is where you're going. You can even add a little animation if you want. So if you want a little move in, slide out, maybe a little dissolve, it'll be pretty cool. And you can customize this to your heart's content. So when you're showing people your app ideas, you can add all the polish in the world. Okay, and you'll also notice as we kind of move this element, the arrow does follow. So if we have a project with a whole bunch of phone screens, these arrows are going to be showing you those connections visually. Let's go ahead and build out our email example. So what do we want these tasks to kind of look like when we are navigating to them? Well, the first thing I'm thinking about designing is I kind of want to keep my gradient background. Maybe that's something that's really important for my branding. Well, we can actually replicate this background really easily. We'll need to go to our home page. We'll click on the design tab. And let's say I really want to keep this linear design. Let's go ahead and click on our linear design again. And you can see that we have this plus button here that says new style or variable. So we can actually keep this style. So if we want to replicate this gradient, and maybe it's important for our branding, we totally can. Just like within coding, we can replicate any of our designs. So let's give it a name. We can call it gradient BG, even give it a description. My name's kind of descriptive, so I might just leave it blank. And let's go ahead and create that style. Now when we click on our email example page and we go to our fill option, we can kind of see that we have this little, it kind of looks like 4 little circles in a grid. It says apply styles and variables. Let's click on it. We can see that we have our gradient background. And now we can continue to replicate that background. Once you've done it once, you can apply that style anywhere else. What do we want our tasks to kind of look like here? Well, it'll probably start with a header, most likely, of text. So I'm going to go ahead and grab our text box. You don't also have to make a text box. You can also click and you'll see that we can just start typing, kind of see that flashing kind of line there. And I believe our title was email Tim. So let's kind of formulate this a little bit better. Maybe we can include some details like Tim's email, which was tim@tim.com. Super creative, I know. Something that we can maybe do is also include the date and time wheel to kind of have a time of when people need to do it. Search for time here. We have the date and time picker with a few different options. We have one with like the calendar. We have one that's a little bit more choose the date and the time. Let's go ahead and add that. We can even make it a little bit more relevant. So maybe this is 2025, but we need to fix the font again. I'm just going to replace it with Poppins. So we can make this maybe August 21st. And for the time, let's put it at 10 a.m. And we can kind of see that our element have updated here. Something we might also want is to create more of a custom UI element here. We can create a different shape. We can even add images or videos. I'm going to kind of do the rectangle, which is the more default tool. And I'm going to kind of drag out where I want my rectangle to be. Go ahead and line it up a little bit better with our user interface. And something I really like to do with my rectangles or anything that's more boxy is under the appearance on the right side of our screen here is I like to add a corner radius to kind of smooth out the corners. So if we put this to 15, you'll kind of notice that we get this little bit more of a rounded corner. Let's go ahead and make this even cooler. Let's go ahead and add a stroke. We can use black to kind of add an outline. And we can also add some more effects down here. So I'm going to be doing the drop shadow, and we can kind of also adjust how it's offset. So this kind of pops off the screen a little bit more. So maybe this is where we can include some different details, something that's like really pertinent to the user. Maybe this in the future could also be something that we click on that's a text field that they can enter notes about, what do I need to email Tim about? Some more specifics to do with the task at hand. So what we can do is we can grab our text tool again. And let's go ahead and kind of drag a text box within our frame here. And we can put like, ask Tim about the car details. Again, I don't know what you're emailing Tim about in the email, maybe birthday coming up. And so in the email, I could be like, oh, by the way, what are you doing for your birthday? Let's go ahead and add a little text field here that says notes. Even if we don't put it in the perfect spot the first time, we can adjust our elements afterwards. And maybe we can also have a kind of mark as complete. And let's do that with a button. We haven't really talked about buttons yet. So if we do our play button here, go ahead and drag it on in. We can resize it some. And let's go ahead and update the text. With some of these things, you can actually double click on the elements. So in case of the play, we can double click on it. Go ahead and replace it with our Poppins. You can double click and say, mark as complete. Our button's not quite thick enough, so let's go ahead and make it a little bit thicker there. Or I guess wide in this case. And let's go ahead and just delete this play button. We don't need it here. You could also replace it with like a little check mark or something that's a little bit better for the user interface. So another reason I really like Figma is when we kind of are showing off our app, we can use the prototype mode. So if we swap over to the prototype tab on the right side here, we can actually choose which phone we're using or device we're using for prototyping. So I've been kind of building around the iPhone 16. I'm going to make sure that's selected. And then we have this kind of play button in the top right, allowing us to present. So if we click on the present button, it'll open up a separate tab. Might take a while to load. We have our user interface and what it would look like on the phone. Now there's a couple different options. I like to keep the Figma shortcuts and the show hints on click. Essentially, if I'm not clicking on a UI element, it'll be like kind of highlight it, be like, no, you're supposed to click here. You can turn that off if you'd like. So that we can actually press the go to task button and we're taken to that page. Now currently we don't have, any interactivity, but this is also a cool way to just present your app as well as test out how it might flow. Whenever we're done, we can just press the X button in the top left. And what I might want to do just to kind of show how my app works is I might actually want to take the home page here. So we can either select the home page by clicking on it, or in the layers example, oh no, now my camera's blocking it over here. I'm swapping to the other side. Select our home and we can copy and paste this. So we can right click, copy, let's click on the screen. right click, or you can use the Command or Control V to paste. You'll also notice that it does keep all of the links or the connections that were already present. It also might call it home. So we definitely don't want to have this one also be called home. Let's go ahead and re-click it and rename it. We'll call this either home 2 or, home after flow. But essentially what I want to have happen is I'm going to delete this interaction by clicking on the interaction, hitting the delete or backspace key. And now I'm going to actually be getting rid of the email Tim task. You can also choose to maybe fade it out to show people have completed it. In my case, I'm going to delete it. And now when I click on mark as complete, we can go back to our interactions, on tap, action, navigate to, home 2. So now when we go ahead and play our app, all right, I need to do my today's task. All right, let's go ahead and email Tim. All right, it's marked as complete. We're then taken back to a version of the homepage where, emailing Tim is done. I want to have a counter, a daily streak, right? You can really get as intuitive as you want with this tool. It can be really fun to play around with these UIs. If you are ultra lazy when building the UI, another reason I like this asset catalog here is because there are some examples that we can use. And this is really great for things that's really hard to show and kind of recreate, for things like the action sheet or even the color picker, the context menu and things like that. But let's go ahead and say, all right, I'm building a list on my iPhone and it's already going to be pretty populated. So let's say we take this kind of list item here. We can actually even just drag and drop this phone screen down. And Figma's already done a lot of the work. So it's like if I want to go to the design tab here, we can actually click on these items, even this specific title, we can even double click on it and we can edit all of the text and items here. You might just need to do a few clicks to kind of get to the exact portion that you want. I had to double click like 10 times there. You can work smarter, not harder with all of these different options, because when you are working in, let's say, Xcode to build out all these iOS elements, a lot of the kind of default styles you might be using already exist here. You'll just need to add your own custom style, the kind of navigation, which I've shown you how to do, etc., etc. Another thing I wanted to kind of show you for user interface, if you are kind of showing this as a work through of your app, is let's say we click on this toggle, we can adjust the state here. So what if we want to make that toggle interactable on our wireframe? Let's go ahead and go to our prototype tab. Let's do the interactions. Let's say we want to trigger on tap. And for the action, we can do the change to, and this is where we can change the state. So this is pretty cool that we can actually change the kind of toggling on and off of the toggles. I think that's pretty awesome. You even add an animation as well. Go ahead and play our prototype again. So we gotta remember we're gonna go email Tim. If I don't want the reminder, I can click it and I've toggled it off, and I could still even go ahead and mark it as complete, and we can kind of see our page here. This is a very basic tutorial on how you can actually build out your wireframe, your kind of planned home screen in Figma. There are so many cool tools and different style choices that you can make under the design tab with the different elements, bringing your own images in. This is just scratching the surface to kind of give you the basics and fundamentals of creating a wireframe in Figma. If you enjoyed this video, leave me a like. And if you want more Figma or wireframe content, let me know in the comments below, or if there's a specific thing you'd like me to cover. Otherwise, I always say on the end of this channel, dream big, code bigger, and part of coding, and especially app development, is designing UI UX. So I'm gonna say dream big, code bigger, and have a great day. We'll see you in the next one.